Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I worked for a company for just under 5 years. The company I worked for existed for an additional 10 years prior to me. While I worked at this company, it ballooned to be the #1 provider in the region for its unique service with about 75% of the market. It was a small business of about 15 employees. I loved my job, and the skills I learned while working there were quite valuable. I loved my team and the clients we provided service for. My twice-yearly reviews with the owner were always 10 out of 10 with no recommendations for improvement. I was exceptional at my job in every way. I handled company operations, HR/payroll, customer service, marketing, employee management, schedules, employee and client training, and many other things at this company. I was also able to step in and do any of my teammates' jobs if they were out sick or on vacation. The owner of the company was giving out a bonus late summer last year and mine, while being more than previous years was notably less than my teammates. I asked the owner, are the bonuses related to performance? And if so, what could I have done to earn more? The owner replied, the bonuses are not performance related, you are just more replaceable than the others. Oh, okay, I replied, and I proceeded to process each of the bonuses, then went to lunch. I called my spouse to gain wisdom and advice. I was pretty lit but didn't want to make a rash decision. My spouse is very intelligent, and while they are not a fortune teller, they have an ability to foresee various responses and all the potential outcomes. They are business-wise and have been on the executive team of a large company for the past 21 years, while also serving on several community boards and business advisory boards. We decided together to continue forward with our scheduled vacation and use the time away to calm our minds, relax, have fun, and to also determine the best course of action for me. We were leaving after working one more day, so I worked like all was normal the rest of the day and the following day, then left on vacation. While away, we discussed several scenarios, the potential outcomes, consulted with a business advisor and a business attorney. With all the advice I received, I determined that upon my return from vacation, I would resign from my role with a 2-week notice. However, in a fit of rage, I was immediately terminated by the owner, which was one of the scenarios we thought would happen, so I was prepared for the owner's poor reaction. During the next couple of weeks, I created and opened a competing business offering similar services. However, I offered more customizable options with high quality service and results. I knew our clients wanted these options and had proposed said options several times at the old workplace, but were never greenlit to implement the changes for no reason other than owner didn't come up with the idea, so it was a stupid idea. I also maintained communications with a few people from my old team. My old team did not relay the day-to-day happenings at my previous workplace, and I never asked about the company. However, they would vent to me on occasion. I would listen without comment. I knew service, quality, and the work environment in general suffered since my departure. Morale went down and clients were less satisfied. I also read the Google and Facebook reviews for my old company. Yikes! Additionally, 2 full-time and 1 part-time persons were hired to fill my role, and a portion of my responsibilities like HR and payroll were filled by outside companies. I quickly built up my business and within 3 months was able to hire several of my old teammates. They were able to jump in on day 1 with minimal training as they were the best employees at my old workplace. The quality of the previous workplace offerings continued to fall, which sent additional business my way and quickly caused incoming work to be non-existent at the old workplace. My old workplace went from being the #1 provider of unique service in the region to nothing in a matter of months. My previous employer is now searching for gainful employment. I know this because over the weekend, the owner applied for a position at my spouse's company. Side note, I think my spouse's company should bring my previous employer in for an interview, but when they arrive, surprise, I am the interviewer, and all I say is, how replaceable am I now? My spouse, rightfully so, has said no. Moral of the story: don't tell your employees they are replaceable because they might create a competing business that is better than yours while taking your best employees and your clients, which will leave you with no business to sell. Owner's whole retirement plan was to sell the business and starting all over by searching for employment under someone else. Looks like your company was replaceable, not me. Someone had an Ask Critic question about revenge, and it made me think about this gem from nearly 20 years ago. I've been a real estate broker in Chicago for nearly 20 years. I started at a very small independent brokerage. It was my first week there when a broker/owner gave me a lead. He was older and wasn't in a very good health, so he passed a lot of his leads to his agents. One of the broker's friends passed away and a friend's son wanted to sell the house. I call the son, who tells me he's known the broker for 30 plus years. He seems like a really nice guy. I go over and check out the house. I work up a gorgeous comparative market analysis. I have other brokers check my numbers. I was new, I wanted to do a perfect job for my new clients. I rehearse my presentation, have my stuff professionally printed, prepare for any possible questions, have responses ready for objections, and I head out. I dazzle this guy with my presentation. He likes the $135,000 list price I recommend. He's fine with the commission, he has no objections, but he asks me to give him 2 months to clean up the house, give his siblings a chance to go through everything and then repaint. Now, I know how to handle this, but at the time I just said I'd call him in 2 months to get it listed. Bad move. But I trusted him because he and deceased father were so close with my broker, I didn't expect what would come next. 3 days later, I am driving through town and I see a for sale by owner sign in the yard. That's when I realized that I wasted several hours doing work for him and he completely bluffed me and used me. I didn't call him back then. Nowadays, I wouldn't either. But that's only because I'd have the listing before he had the chance to put that FSBO sign in the yard. Experience counts for a lot. Anyway, my broker was at City Hall about 5 to 6 weeks later paying for transfer stamps when he just happened to notice in the registry that the previous customer was a son. The son had just paid for transfer stamps earlier, which essentially meant that the house had sold. I waited until the prescribed 2 months and called the son for my revenge. I played stupid and the conversation went something like this. And I talked fast so I could get the whole thing out before he could cut me off and tell me he sold it. I say, "Hey Len, it's Misery over at ABC Realty. I figured I'd give you a call to see if you got the house cleaned out and repainted because I had a relocation company call me with the information from a doctor looking to move to the area. While I talked to the guy, I thought about your house and mentioned it to him, since it's only 2 blocks from the hospital where he's going to be working. And I told him how nice it was. He basically told me to make you an offer, sight unseen. I couldn't remember what I said the house was worth, but I told him $215,000. He couldn't believe how inexpensive it was. But he's living in New York. You said your house sounds like it's 3 times the size of his and have the price of what he'd pay in New York City. So I don't remember what I told you it was worth, but his all cash was to be able to move in 3 weeks. So would $215,000 work for you? Because I can write it up, fax it over to him for signatures, and get you done. There was a long silence before he exploded. You jerk! You told me it was worth $135,000. Well, we didn't even list it yet. And it looks like I just got you $80,000 more. What are you all upset about? I just sold the house. I sold it for $130 because you told me that was what I should expect to get. Oh damn, you sold it? That's good for you and good to know that my estimate on the sale price was spot on. Well, no problem. I'm sure I can find something else for my buyer. Screw your buyer. I want my $80,000. I don't know where you're going with this. You sold your house for a price you were happy with. I just happened to get an out-of-towner on a fluke who was willing to pay more. But hey, you sold it and you got fair market value, so you did great. Screw you, you jerk. I want that $80,000. Well, I've never heard of this before, but if you can get the house back, I can talk to my buyer and see if he'll wait for you to close again. I don't know if that's even a possibility. No, you're going to pay me $80,000. Well, that's not going to happen. I can just hire a professional appraiser to show that you got market value for the house. My mistake was quoting my buyer the wrong price, not you. You can expect to hear from my attorney. Well, that's fine, but I'm going to have to let you go now. I've got to get over to your old house to see if the new owners will be willing to give me a copy of their appraisal and see if they might want to sell it for a quick profit. Do you know if they moved in already? Jerk. And that's when he slammed the phone down. I would never do this now, even though I have plenty of people who waste my time. It comes with a job, and getting upset doesn't make it better. However, I still think about that call today, and while part of me feels like a jerk, I still get a little smile thinking about him kicking himself for screwing me over. Here is a little more to the story. Something I do to drum up business is offer help finding tax comparables for people so they can try to get a tax reduction from the county. I actually went to meet the new owners of that house and offered to help them dispute their taxes free of charge. They were actually a really nice couple, and they ended up using me to sell that house 8 years later just before the market crashed. So they had done some really nice stuff to the house at a top-notch price, and they ended up getting $345,000 for it. They were doing a back-to-back closing, sell one and buy the new one on the same day. The house they were buying burned down, but they still sold theirs and moved in with relatives while they looked for something new. The market literally crashed 2 months later while they were living with the wife's grandparents. They stayed there for 2 more years, and then I helped them buy a huge 4,000 square foot foreclosure for $130,000. New construction that hadn't been completed, just needed trim, a garage, some light fixtures, and a kitchen which they were happy to install on their own considering the price and location. It is currently worth about $550K since that area is just booming again. They have been very happy with me and have sent me a few referrals. As a side note, I told them about Lynn, a very watered down version that didn't make me look like a jerk. And they happily gave me a copy of their appraisal, just in case he decided to call a lawyer. They said he was a jerk to deal with, and got into a huge fight with his siblings at the closing, saying he should get $20,000 more because he had to handle the sale, and that's what the realtor would have charged. No, since his dad was close with my broker, we were only charging him 4.5%, around $5,850 on $130,000 house. So, did he ever call a lawyer? Yes. About a year later, he called the only lawyer he knew, my broker's brother. The brother talked to my broker, who then talked to me. I gave him the market analysis and the appraisal. We never heard another thing about it. This didn't happen in the US, but rather in a country in the Middle East, where certain behaviors, though shocking, sometimes get swept under the rug. But not this time. This is a tale of entitlement, justice, and a mother's fierce love for her child. My daughter, Lila, was in the 2nd grade, a sweet, timid girl who loved going to school. She was always eager to learn, making friends with everyone, and adored by her teachers. Or so I thought. Enter Mrs. Arifa, let's call her that. The new teacher who had a reputation for being strict but had shown a side of entitlement no one was prepared for. The incident happened around Mother's Day, a time when you'd expect love and appreciation to fill the air, especially in schools where children are taught to celebrate such occasions with simple gestures and handmade gifts. Lila had spent the night before crafting a small heartfelt card for me, pouring her love into every scribble. However, she hadn't made anything for Mrs. Arifa. Honestly, it never crossed our minds that she was expecting something from her students. On the day after Mother's Day, Lila came home in tears, her cheek red and swollen. My heart dropped to my stomach when she told me what happened. According to Lila, Mrs. Arifa had asked each student to present the gifts they had brought for her. When it was Lila's turn, she shyly admitted she hadn't brought anything. What happened next was beyond anything I could have imagined. Mrs. Arifa, in front of the whole class, slapped Lila across the face, berating her for being ungrateful and disrespectful. Fury doesn't begin to describe what I felt. My first instinct was to confront Mrs. Arifa, but my husband calmed me down, suggesting we talk to the school administration first. The next day, armed with righteous anger and determination to see justice done, we met with the principal. After explaining what had happened, the principal was horrified and promised immediate action. The school conducted a swift investigation during which several other children corroborated Lila's story. It turns out Mrs. Arifa had a history of entitlement and inappropriate behavior, feeling that she deserved special treatment from her students and their parents. The confrontation with Mrs. Arifa was something straight out of a drama. In the principal's office with the administration present, I faced a woman who had hurt my child. She initially denied everything, accusing Lila of lying, but when I confronted her with the testimonies of other students, her defiance crumbled. But she still refused to apologize, insisting she was trying to teach the children a lesson about appreciation. And that's when I lost it. "You want to teach my child about appreciation?" I said, my voice icy calm despite the storm raging inside me. "Then let me teach you about consequences." And with that, I slapped her. Not my proudest moment and certainly not something I would advise anyone to do, but at that moment it felt like the only fitting response. The room went silent and Mrs. Arifa's hand flew to her cheek, mirroring the injury she had inflicted on my daughter. The aftermath was swift. Mrs. Arifa was fired from her job, faced assault charges, and was barred from teaching. The school issued a formal apology to us and implemented new policies to ensure this kind of abuse would never happen again. Lila was moved to a different class, where she thrived under the care of a wonderful teacher who understood the true meaning of education and respect. Quick preface. After reading some of the comments, I'd like to state that this story is in no way indicative of what Mexico is like every day. I've traveled frequently to and from the country for the better part of the last 10 years, and this is the first time anything of the sort has happened to me. Mexico is an awesome place that is nothing like what you see or read in the news. Unfortunate things happen everywhere. I love Mexico and the people there, and will defend it and them at every opportunity I get. I am currently spending a few weeks visiting my in-laws in Mexico. My wife, daughter, and I took my in-laws' car to go get some groceries from the Tianguis street market and turned down a road that leads right to it. No sooner had I done this, and a police officer on his motorcycle pulled me over. Now, it's very obvious by both the color of my skin as well as my accent that I am most definitely not Mexican. Now, it's very obvious by both the color of my skin as well as my accent that I'm most definitely not Mexican, nor from any Latin American country for that matter. Mildly important for the story. The police officer says, "Oh, and this road is one direction only. When the market is here, you can't drive this way on a road." "Oh, sorry. I didn't know that. Can I see your license, please?" I unfortunately didn't have my wallet on me. The Tianguis is cash only, so I didn't bother. This also meant that I didn't have my license on me either, which was 100% my bad. "I'm sorry, officer, but I left it at the house." "Well, that's 2 tickets. One for driving the wrong way and the other for not having your license on you. I am going to have to ticket you. And as a guarantee that you'll go pay it, I will have to take your license plates." I had never heard this before. Turns out that while taking license plates or even driver's licenses as collateral for traffic infractions is common practice in Mexico, it's also sometimes used as leverage to get you to pay a mordida or a bribe to the officer to let you off, especially if you're a foreigner. So I decided to call his bluff and comply. "Okay, officer, you can take my plates. When should I go see the judge to pay my tickets and get my plates back?" The officer, a bit taken aback, "Well, I don't really know. It could be a while." "Well, I'm happy to go pay my fines if she's back before Thursday, because that's when my flight leaves." Awkward silence while I wait for him to pull out a screwdriver and start removing the car's license plate. He says, "I don't really know." Another awkward silence while I still wait for him to take my plates. "Well, that's okay. I'm the one who broke the law, so go ahead and take my plates." The officer walked away for a minute and pulled another car over that came down the same road as us. I think that during that time, he realized I wasn't going to pay a mordida and that the tickets he was threatening were probably just more paperwork than he was willing to do. Because when he came back, "You know what? I'm just going to let you go with a warning." "Awesome. Thanks, officer." In the late 90s, wife and I were just married, just getting started, and we decided to dink it. Double income, no kids, for a few years to save up for a down payment on a house. The dot-com bubble was still rising and I was a newly minted software developer. I had an entry-level job for a while and then got recruited to a new city and a new job that paid 3 times what I was making before. It was an offer too good to pass up. I ran the numbers and it was a no-brainer. By living frugally and saving my entire salary, living off just her income, we would easily have enough in a year to put 20% down payment on a new house. We rented an apartment in a new city that was listed for $950 per month. The landlord was a real estate agent who owned a 2-bedroom condo as an investment property. Let's call him Hank Wazowski. Hank was a thin, gray, no-nonsense guy. He was pleasant enough but perfunctory dry and had no sense of humor. He made a point of explaining that under no circumstances was he responsible for maintaining the garbage disposal and that it was not included in the rental agreement and he would not be responsible for fixing it were it to break. Okay. He seemed slightly amused by us, a clueless young, newlywed couple, but I could tell he wanted to rent to us because we were very obviously a safe choice as renters. We filled out the rental agreement and the credit check, and this is where my troubles began. Hank looked hard at the credit application where I listed my job title, software developer, and my income $75K. For a 23-year-old in his second year out of college in the late 1990s, this is a small fortune. Throw in my wife's salary and we were over 6 figures in income, renting an apartment far beneath our means. Like I said, Ding is a way to go when starting out. I can't believe how much money you make. Hank must have said half a dozen times, muttering under his breath. I explained we were saving to buy a house and that we were only going to stay in the apartment a year. We might stay a few months after the term is over. Would months to months be okay after a year? Hank assured us that would be fine. We saw Hank only once during the year and he again mentioned my salary and how he couldn't believe that's what a software developer was making. It was awkward and I gave a vague reply. Anyway, a year later we had found a house to buy, signed all the papers and were making plans to move. The new house wasn't going to be ready until 2 months after our rental lease was up. So I called Hank to ask if we could, as discussed, simply extend the lease by 2 months before moving out. Hank assured me on the phone it would be no problem and he would send over an extension for us to sign. The extension arrived in the mail and it included a month-to-month clause and a $500 increase in the rent. I flipped out and called him. Hank, why are you increasing the rent over 50%? That's too much. That's more than my new mortgage is going to be. He was super condescending to me. Rocky Moose, it's what the apartment goes for now. I would be losing money by renting it for less. I tried to reason with him, but it was very clear he knew we could afford the $500. Had no choice in the matter, and he was going to screw us over as best as he could. He got angry with me for arguing my point, and I'll never forget his parting words. You don't have to like it, Rocky Moose, you just have to pay it. My wife and I tried to figure out a way to move out early by putting our furniture in storage for a couple months and crashing with friends, but it just wasn't going to work out. I swallowed my pride and wrote out the check for $1,450 for the extra months. A month later I wrote a similar check and then we moved out. I made sure the apartment was spotless before moving, but still Hank withheld $300 from our security deposit for bullcrap things that were just a way for him to squeeze a few more dollars from the kids who made too much money. $100 for cleaning, sure, but $300 was obscene. In my mind, he had screwed me over for $1,200 and there was nothing I could do about it. What made it even more infuriating is that I saw the ad Hank put in the paper after we moved out, and he listed the apartment for rent at only $150 more than we had been paying originally, not the grossly inflated $500 increase, and it didn't trend. A month later I saw the same ad and he had lowered the price to 75% more than we had been paying, and I assume it got rented since the ad stopped appearing. Fast forward about 5 years, life is good, the house is good, We have a baby, and even though the dot-com bubble has burst, I'm still employed. One day, out of the blue, I overhear one of my co-workers, Phil, a senior developer, talking to the guy working the reception desk. Hey Mike, I'm expecting someone to drop off some paperwork for me. If a Hank Kozowski asks for me, tell him I'll be right out. I freeze and get a taste of bile in my mouth, remembering how I had to write out that name on those checks all those years ago. There is no way it's the same guy, right? I walk over to Phil, who's still by the reception desk. Phil, I say, how do you know that name? Hank Kozowski. Phil explains that Hank is his real estate agent. I bought my condo through him several years ago. I am selling my condo now so I can buy a house. So I'm going to ask him to be my agent again. Do you know him? I tell Phil that I used to rent an apartment from Hank and describe what he looks like. Phil confirms the description. It's the same guy. Wow, small world, right? And on cue, right then the front door to the office opens and in walks Hank. I stare in disbelief. He's carrying a folder of papers and doesn't recognize me. Phil and Hank shake hands and they talk for a few moments. I stand there silently wondering what to do. Phil finally says, Hank, this is my friend Rocky Moose. I think you may have already met. Well, yes, hello Hank. Good to see you again. My wife and I were your tenants a few years ago on X Street, remember? I'm the software developer who rented for a year saving to buy a house. Well, this is where I work. Here, with Phil. Hank's eyes indicate he now remembers me, and he's starting to put it all together. We shake hands and he says yes, of course he remembers, and asks how we are doing. Oh, we're just fine. Thanks for asking. Phil says that you're his real estate agent. Small world, isn't it? Hank nods pleasantly. He still doesn't remember the details of our last conversation. I do some quick math in my head. This is the early/mid 2000s. The real estate market is very strong and easy money for any agent. The crash of 2008 is still a few years in the future. I start to think out loud. Selling the condo for around 150 to 200,000, and you're looking at houses in the 500,000 range. So that's 650 to 700,000 in total transactions. An agent getting 3% on a sale and the purchase is getting around to An agent getting 3% on a sale and a purchase is getting around $20,000 for his trouble. That's a good commission for the agent, isn't it? Hank's eyes flash and I can tell he remembers everything about me now. Phil is surprised at my passive-aggressive tone, and I'm enjoying the uncomfortable silence. Hank deflects my question, saying it's complicated, and tells Phil to send back the papers as soon as possible. He shakes hands with Phil, looks at me, nods, and goes to leave. It was really good to see you again, Hank. I call behind him. He exits the building, and as the door is still shutting, I say a bit too loudly so that Hank can hear. Phil, don't sign anything just yet. I have a story to tell you. Phil looks at me and says, Rocky, what the hell was that all about? He looks pissed and confused at my behavior. I tell Phil the whole story, the rent, the $500, the $500 increase, the security deposit. You don't have to like it, you just have to pay it, everything. Phil, you can't use this guy to sell your condo and buy a house. I hate him. He's evil. I'll help you find another real estate agent. Just use anyone but Hank. So the great thing about Phil is that, well, he's a great guy. He says he's a little surprised at my story and has always known Hank as a straightforward guy. But I totally see him doing that to you. He admits, there's no way I could use him now. What a jerk. Then Phil's eyes lit up a bit. What do you want me to say when I fire him? I have special feelings for Phil now. We came up with a plan and I made sure there were some key phrases in Phil's repertoire. We planned it all out together in advance. My only regret is that I didn't get to see Hank's reaction in person a day later when Phil made the following phone call while I stood behind him listening. Hi Hank, it's Phil calling. Yeah, about that, I've decided to get some other quotes from other agents. I'm not going to sign up with you. There is a pause. No, you shouldn't give a discount. You'll be losing money if you did that. Another pause. No, this is just a decision I've made. No, it has nothing to do with Rocky Moose. A third pause. Well, you don't have to like it, Hank. You just have to accept it. Goodbye. Click. And it was the greatest revenge I could have ever imagined. Through a chance meeting years later, Hank got screwed out of $20,000 in easy commissions. And the best part is Hank absolutely knew it had everything to do with Rocky Mouse. This goes back a long time, to the mid-1980s. I was working for a fellow named Max, who built a business from the ground up. He came to Canada from Europe as a child, as a World War II refugee with his parents, penniless. A real success story, and the nicest guy you would ever want to work for. We see a few posts in this sub about jerk bosses. Max was the opposite. His business was built around packaging. It was a slitter/rewinder operation. To illustrate, this is a slitter. It takes wide rolls of material, slits it into strips, and then rewinds it onto cores. Max developed and patented a process that was able to put 15 to 20 times more material onto a finished core than any of his competitors. You've seen a roll of masking tape? Picture a stack of thin rolls about 2 or 3 times the diameter, but all wound onto a single core. We made a number of products. You know the infuriating tear tape that you use to open a pack of cigarettes or a CD? Yeah, we made that. We also had a client in Germany that would send us big rolls of raw, elastic material, which we would slit and then send back to them. It was used for, if you can believe it, baby diaper legs. The elastic that holds the diaper to the infant's leg gently but firmly. The Germans once visited our factory. Max treated them royally, and they took photos of everyone, including the machine operators, next to the machines, the raw materials, and the finished product. Now, for those of you who aren't parents, babies are little crap factories, and the baby diaper business is enormous. We're talking about 50 billion annually worldwide. So our client's contract is coming up for renewal in a month or two, and Max isn't seeing much in the way of interest. Remember, if they go with a competitor, they will have to shut down their machines much more frequently to change the rolls of elastics for the legs. This doesn't make much sense, as it would slow production down considerably. Max reaches out again and gets a very non-committal response. Something's fishy. Now, you have to remember that this business is Max's baby, and he was both the nicest guy and one of the most tenacious and determined men I have ever met. So Max arranged for some detectives in Germany to investigate. They reported that the client hadn't retooled their machines to accept the competition's pools, nor did they appear to have any plans to. The detectives also discovered that some people connected with a German factory had set up a factory of their own, a slitter factory. Yep, those sneaky guys were about to open their own plant to supply spools of baby diaper leg elastic to the diaper factory, and save themselves the cost of shipping the material to Canada for processing. And they were going to duplicate exactly the rolls they were getting from us. So Max waits until the moment the renewal option on the contract expires, then slaps his new factory with an injunction for patent infringement. Well, now the crab has hit the fan. The baby diaper factory has a stock of elastic that will run out in days. For them to retool their machines to accept a competitor's roll will take weeks, and they have commitments to the brand name companies that package and retail the diapers. So guess who starts burning up the phones to reach Max? Max knows that they are spending a fortune on transatlantic shipping to move the product, so he renegotiates to include a much higher price for processing, as well as a clause where he handles the shipping costs again at a boost to the price. The factory really has no choice. They have to sign. It's that or take massive non-compliance penalties from their customers. Then having cut a deal where he makes a price per load of product to handle the logistics, he turns to the new factory itself. You see, they had invested heavily in new slitters. They modified them to produce Max's cores. They couldn't be used in production due to the injunction, and couldn't be returned to the manufacturer due to the modifications. And they were looking at a long and protracted legal battle that was set to cost a bundle in lawyers' fees. Max offered to drop the legal battle and buy the factory at much less than it was worth. They had no choice. They had to sell, and it was in the same city as a baby diaper factory. So Max now bumped his price and was compensated shipping per load of product as if the load came from overseas, when actually it was just down the road. We ended up using the excess production capacity in Canada to market these cores to North America diaper factories. And the factory in Germany started making inroads into the European markets. All in all, it was a nice win for Max, and put him into an unusually good mood for quite some time.